It is not that the book, that sanctuary which the man himself, in a fit of defensive retrospective ledger balancing, called a cheap thing spawned in necessity and the stark need for coin, was ever merely a pot-boiler, but rather that it stands years or generations later as a furious and turgid autopsy performed upon a social body already dead before the first word was scratched into the paper. Because there, in the shifting mud of an old and blood-dyed earth, the grand illusion of the human will dissolves into the quiet, terrible machinery of what has gone before, so that Temple Drake and the spent idealist Benbow, and even Popeye himself, that modern, mechanical intruder with eyes like two knobs of soft black rubber stamped out of a blind, unsouled factory, are not separate beings at all, but are merely the nodes upon a single closed circuit of an immemorial suffering. They move not by their own volition, but are jerked and twitched across the stage by the invisible puppet strings of old grandfathers and forgotten sins, performing with a frantic, desperate compliance a script that was written in the soil long before they ever drew their first breath, trapped in the roles that a furious and unheeding culture handed them at the birth couch. And the world looks upon the monster and condemns him, because the world must always condemn what it fears to recognize in its own mirror. Yet the narrative pauses the frantic momentum of the doom just long enough to reveal the ledger of the boy's beginning, the frail, unnamed, biological inheritance, the pyromaniac grandmother, and the mother huddled in the smoke of an abandoned house, until the rape and the murder become not the wild outbursts of a free agent, but the cold, predictable arithmetic of a human organism starved of grace from the cradle. It is the same inexorable arithmetic that sits silent and skeletal in the box beneath the bootlegger's bed, where the Goodwin baby lies, failure to thrive made flesh, a tiny, grayish entity that has already learned the finality of a world that does not answer when it cries, so that the child becomes the prologue to Popeye's terrible epilogue. Here in the dim room where criminals drink, the biological template and the toxic nurture converge. That biopsychosocial web that the clinicians would name only after the tragedy had already spent itself, to demonstrate how the innocent are cast into the gears to manufacture the next generation's monster, paying with their own frail flesh for the imperfections of the fathers. For there is no sanctuary in the courthouse where the law is merely a theater of loud mirrors, nor in the city where everything is transactional and blind, and those who try to fight the machine from within its own gears, like Benbow, with his outmoded manners and his fragile, book-learned justice, are only ground into a finer, more pitiable dust. The only true sanctuary, then, is not found by storming the gates or shouting into the furious wind of a corrupted culture, but by the quiet, radical act of turning one's back upon the stage entirely, a creative secession where a soul withdraws from the performance to build something different behind the scenes. It is there, in the widening of that small, sacred space between the world's frantic stimulus and the human spirit's deliberate response, that the old scripts lose their absolute grip, and a person might finally plant their roots, not in the toxic runoff of a manufactured society, but in the clean, unhurried, and immemorial rhythms of the earth itself, where the past is finally quiet, and the soul is at last its own.